let's talk about Romantic criticism, and this is also our fourth chapter. So let's begin. In the early 19th century, British Romanticism brought in fresh ideas about aesthetics and the study of literature. The core belief was simple yet profound. Literature can take even an ordinary subject and raise it to a sublime level. It doesn't have to be beautiful, noble, or perfect to achieve greatness. This movement developed as a response to the rigid neoclassical ideals. While it started as a European wave, its roots stretched into the German Sturm und Drang movement, which valued intuition and emotion over the cold rationalism of the Enlightenment. The French Revolution also had a powerful influence, fueling the Romantics with its emphasis on freedom and human spirit. For them, individual responsibility mattered more than blind adherence to customs and traditions. Among the early pioneers were Friedrich Schlegel and August Wilhelm Schlegel. In the 1790s, they even coined the term romantische Poesie, meaning romantic poetry. Soon, the movement swept into English literature. It began in the late 18th century with poets like William Blake, William Wordsworth, and Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and carried into the 19th century with the second generation Percy Bysshe Shelley, John Keats, and Lord Byron. This era was shaped by some key publications: Wordsworth and Coleridge's lyrical ballads in England, Novalis' Hymns to the Night, the visionary poetry of William Blake, the heartfelt songs of Robert Burns, and Rousseau's philosophical writings. Even Walt Whitman's Song of Myself resonates with romantic spirit, as does the poetry of Coleridge. A major critical voice here is M.H. Abram. In his work The Mirror and the Lamp, and do pay attention because this was asked in exam, Abrams explains how 18th century literature worked like a mirror reflecting external reality. By contrast, 19th century literature functioned like a lamp shining with inner illumination. The mirror symbolized intellectual reflection, while the lamp symbolized emotional and spiritual expression. Now, what about the key characteristics of Romantic literature? First, it glorifies nature. It places deep stress on emotions and teaches acceptance of them. There is an active interest in the common person and in childhood. Romantic works celebrate strong senses, feelings, and imagination. Creativity and originality are highly valued. Beauty and aesthetics are central, but solitude remains one of its core themes. Nature is not only admired but often seen with awe. The individual is celebrated. There's also a fascination with exotic settings and history. Many works weave in spiritual and supernatural elements. The language is vivid, full of sensory descriptions. Romantic writing often focuses on the self, leaning into autobiography. And finally, personification is frequently used to give human qualities to the natural world. So, Romanticism was not just a movement, it was a way of reimagining what literature could be, turning the world inward and outward at the same time. Before Romanticism took full shape, there were thinkers who laid the groundwork for its emotional and imaginative spirit. Two names you must remember here are Jean-Jacques Rousseau and Madame de Staël. Let's begin with Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Born in 1712, Rousseau stood against the cold rationalism of the Enlightenment. In works like Émile, published in 1762, and Confessions in 1782, he placed emotion, nature, and individuality at the center of human experience. He believed that people are naturally good, but society corrupts them with its artifices. Pause here and note this. Rousseau's call for a return to nature became one of the strongest influences on Romantic writers. His stress on sincerity, personal feeling, and freedom prepared the ground for the Romantic imagination, which rejected neoclassical order and instead celebrated self-expression and authenticity. Now let's turn to Madame de Staël. Born in 1766, she became one of the most important cultural critics of her time. Her book, De l'Allemagne, published in 1810, introduced German Romantic thinkers like Goethe and Schiller to French and English audiences. Imagine the impact through her. Romantic ideas crossed borders and began reshaping European literature. Can you recall why this matters? Because Staël emphasized imagination, spirituality, and national character, moving beyond Enlightenment universalism. She showed that literature should be rooted in culture and history, not abstract rules. By doing this, she bridged Enlightenment rationality with Romantic subjectivity, making her a key mediator in spreading Romantic aesthetics across Europe. When we think of Romantic philosophy, Germany becomes the beating heart of the movement. Here, poets, critics, and philosophers worked hand in hand, blending art with philosophy to redefine aesthetics, freedom, and the very nature of human creativity. Let's meet the key figures. We begin with Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Born in 1749, Goethe believed that true art is not mechanical but organic. Just as a tree grows naturally from within, he argued that a genuine work of art develops from its own inner laws, not from imposed rules. This idea of organic form, expressed in Faust and his conversations with Eckermann, became central to Romantic aesthetic. He fused classical balance with Romantic imagination, offering a vision of art rooted in transformation and wholeness. His thought strongly influenced Coleridge, who carried this principle into English and Romantic criticism. Next we have August Wilhelm Schlegel, born in 1767. Alongside his brother Friedrich, he helped shape Jena Romanticism through the Athenaeum Journal at the turn of the 19th century. His translations of Shakespeare into German are still celebrated as masterpieces. But he also went further, introducing Europe to Sanskrit by translating the Bhagavad Gita in 1823 and parts of the Ramayana in 1829. His comparative lectures on art, literature, and language made him a bridge between European Romanticism and Oriental studies. Now, let's turn to Friedrich von Schiller, Goethe's close friend and collaborator. Born in 1759, Schiller was not only a dramatist but also a philosopher. His letters on the aesthetic education of man were written as a response to the French Revolution. He was troubled that a great historical moment had descended into violence, and he asked, how do we prevent ideals from collapsing into chaos? His answer was aesthetic education. For Schiller, art reconciles body and mind, sense and reason, helping individuals become free and harmonious. This was not just a cultural vision but a deeply political one. The younger brother, Friedrich Schlegel, born in 1772, carried Jena Romanticism into bold new directions. Rejecting religious orthodoxy, he embraced radical individualism and atheism early in life. His critical fragments and theories of irony shaped Romanticism as both an artistic and philosophical movement. He influenced Coleridge in England and poets in Poland like Adam Mickiewicz, spreading Romantic ideas across Europe. For him, Romantic irony was not just a technique, it was a worldview, one that saw art and life as perpetually unfinished, dynamic, and self-reflective. Finally, we arrive at Friedrich Wilhelm Schelling, born in 1775, a philosopher whose thought constantly evolved. Schelling sought unity between spirit and matter. In works like On the Relation of the Plastic Arts to Nature, he argued that art is the medium through which nature reveals its essence. Unlike Hegel, whose dialectics aimed for systematic logic, Schelling emphasized creativity, intuition, and the living energy of nature. His ideas inspired the Romantics but also later existentialists, situating him at the crossroads of aesthetics and metaphysics. Let's turn to one of the most visionary figures of the Romantic age, William Blake. Born in 1757, Blake was not only a poet but also a painter and printmaker. What makes him unique is that he brought together poetry and art, creating illuminated books where words and images formed a single imaginative whole. Though neglected in his lifetime, today he stands at the heart of Romantic tradition. Critic Northrop Frye once said that Blake's poetry is what is in proportion to its merits the least read body of poetry in the English language. His work ranges from simple lyrical poems to vast prophetic books, grand mythic and expressed and poems. historical visions infused with radical political ideas. And here's a detail to pause on. It was asked in exam. In Biographia Literaria, Samuel Taylor Coleridge mentions his early association with Blake and Robert Southey, placing Blake among the significant literary figures of his day. Beyond poetry, Blake also wrote prose. His letter to Thomas Butts in April 1803 and the descriptive catalogue in 1809 reveal how deeply he reflected on his own art. That catalogue, tied to an exhibition, included illustrations on many themes, even a famous set inspired by Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. But perhaps Blake's most revolutionary work is The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, written between 1790 and 1793 in the midst of the French Revolution. The title itself is ironic. It alludes to Emanuel Swedenborg's Heaven and Hell, but Blake reshapes it into a daring romantic manifesto. The book mixes poetry and prose, except for the opening argument and the closing Song of Liberty. It begins with a fierce cry. Rintrah rose and shakes his fires in the burdened air, setting the tone for a work of rebellion. Blake overturns conventional morality, insisting that imagination, passion, and energy belong not to heaven but to hell. And here's a classic exam point. Blake claimed that John Milton was a true poet because Paradise Lost was of the devil's party without knowing it, asked in exam. He even suggested that Milton's Satan was his true Messiah. The structure of The Marriage of Heaven and Hell resembles Dante's Divine Comedy and Milton's Paradise Lost, but Blake transforms it into a visionary journey through hell, celebrating contradiction, rebellion, and the liberating power of imagination. For him, poetry was not just art, it was prophecy, revolution, and vision combined. So when you think of William Blake, remember illuminated books, prophetic visions, Coleridge's association, asked in exam, The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, Milton as of the devil's party, asked in exam, and above all the imagination as a force of liberation.